Welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff Podcast. It's me, Scott Martin, as always, from Bonsai Matsu, and you are my people. I honestly mean that. I've had a bit of travelling around the country lately, and I've bumped into a lot of people, chatted to a lot of people, and the love is enormous, which is great, and I greatly appreciate it from the depth of my heart. I want to talk about that a bit more. That's one of the topics for this podcast is Bonsai Love, which I'll delve into a little bit later on. I also want to cover off on a few things that happened recently at a big convention in Perth, Western Australia, over one corner of our large country, and some really interesting things that happened there. And I also want to talk about digging for gold, not prospecting. But I'll break that one down a little bit later for you. We all do it. I'm certain we do it, and if you don't, then you probably should. So we'll get to that. And I'm not talking about yamadori either. So stick around and let's see what happens. So there was recently a big convention, an Australian bonsai convention, where we had lots of people turn up. We had some magnificent trees on display that are really limited to this part of Australia, because Western Australia has got pretty strict quarantine laws for a very good reason, and so no material can actually enter into the state. It all has to be grown locally or sourced locally. And to put in context for anyone that's not in Australia and doesn't get how large our country is, Western Australia is enormous. It's 3 states joined together basically that are just enormous, and the range of climate across that state varies from nice and cold and chilly to the tropics. So it's massive. It's enormous, and it's such a lovely part of the world. To be honest, it's the first time I've been there since I was a very young kid. So really, let's call it the first time I've ever been there, and I'm in love with the place. I saw a snippet of part of the countryside where it's wild, it's remote, it's pristine, it's beautiful. It's like it's untouched. It's like it's been there for a million years. And yeah, piece of my heart's been left over there because there's so much of this state to see that I really want to do a lot more. I was fortunate enough to be in South Australia recently. Felt the same way. Like imagine you've got something in a present, and you've just opened up the very first little corner of that present. You don't know what's inside yet, but you're just getting a sneak peek at it. That's exactly what I feel like with Western Australia as well. There's just so much to see over there. So With the convention, I wanted to talk about, I got to share a stage with a few very talented people, Rafa Torres from Mallorca and Fujikawa-san from Japan. So for me, it was a massive honour, massive privilege to be put aside these guys, because I admire their work, and I loved the challenge of putting myself against those guys, not against them, but at the same level as those guys, and I really enjoyed the process. So what I wanted to talk about with this part of the podcast, there's a few other things in future podcasts, like things that were said and techniques and stuff like that I'll bring up and I'll talk about over a bit of time, but I don't want to overload it with this one convention. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was styling stock initially, and I was given the opportunity to work on a saltwater paperbark, so a melaleuca, and it's native to this area of Western Australia, very, very specific to the southwest part and sort of spreading across the southern part towards South Australia. And it's a species that I hadn't worked with before, and I've been asked before what's my process when I haven't worked with stock. I'm not familiar with stock that I'm working on in a demonstration type scenario, because demonstrations are very different to when you're sitting at home and your feet up looking at a piece of material for a very long period of time, and you're having a cup or a beer or whatever it is, and you're staring at things. There's a different mindset when you've got to do a demonstration. And I'm not a true fan of demonstrations where trees are flogged within an inch of their life, and then they're moved on and put up for auction. And you can tell when that's happened. So I was very mindful that I didn't want to do that with the piece of material that I was working with. And fantastically, I can absolutely put my hand on heart and say that all the material that was worked on over the weekend, the other demonstrators that were working had the same mindset, which was, it was lovely. It was like we were all on the same page about how to care for trees and future. And a lot of the talk that happened was, in the future, this is what will happen, and in the future, that is what will happen, and I would do this and I would do that, and this is how I would care for it going forward. And it was actually really, really positive, whether it was talking about some of our Australian natives, which the international guests hadn't worked on before, or it was talking about, stock, which is common to all of us, like a juniper or something like that. So that was really first and foremost with me was, don't take a tree, buckle it in half, make it look fantastic, and then move it on and say good luck to the person who purchases it at auction. That was never my intent. My intent was to, I've talked about it before, whether I conflict or I fight the style of the tree that it's got, or I work with the style of the tree that's there and try and accentuate what it's got. And that's always my preferred approach. So this piece of material, I got to see it about a week before the demonstration, which was great. Got to have a look at it, got to take some photos, got to put hands on it and have a look and think. And it's daunting, right? If you're looking at a piece of material for the first time, and this happens to me in my yard as well, or I see it with people come into my workshop, look at it and go, where do I start? What's the first thing that I should do? Like, how do I tackle this? Like, how do I get from this? I know there's something in there. There's something that sparks my interest. It's the trunk, it's the twist, it's the characteristics of the foliage, whatever it is. How do I get from there to where I want? Like, I know there's something beautiful there. I just can't see what it is. And I just want to delve into what my process for that is, because it might help the listeners, help you guys to really take that first step that you need to do. So what I did is I took photos from all different angles. I got some reference points of people being in the shots. I got my hands around the trunk so I could sort of get a feel for it. You look at the baseline level of the trunk and get my first point is to take a photo straight. All right, so have a look around the tree, maybe get a few different photos. I love the photos. I love, I don't necessarily love phones and where we get suckered into these things, but I do love the camera function on them and the versatility that they've got. And I use it a lot when it comes to designs that I've got to put a lot of thought into. Often I can look at a tree and go, yeah, there's a nice trunk line, let's do this, and I draw a picture on a board and go, yep, bang, that's it. But this one was a bit more challenging because there was so much foliage on it, like so much scrappy foliage. And if you have a look on Instagram at the photos of this tree, this Melaleuca, you'll see that it was just a bush. It was just a lump of scrub. And so what I did is on the first couple of photos, I just draw the trunk line in there. So it's almost like I put blinkers on and say, what does the trunk look like on this? Where is the key trunk line that I think would work? And I do that on a couple of different photos, looking at front and back, and go, yep, that's sort of the line. And one of the main things that I look for is taper, so that thickening to a thinning process. I never try and have it where it's left as a stump, like a sausage that's been cut off. Try and have it so it meanders down nicely to a thinner point at the apex of the tree. And that way I can work roughly on a height that I'm going to aim for with this tree. Because there's always options with these things to cut them down and reduce them, but the tree that I was working with, I was very deliberate in that I wanted to work with the tree, and I didn't want to be seen as trying to hack this thing down and make a smaller squat bonsai. I wanted a big tree out of this thing because it's a demonstration. Big trees look great, and they're a hell of a lot of work. I had great help on that tree. Keith, my mate, he was. You'll see him in the photos. He's a bloody legend. Great working with him, and he flowed really, really well, and worked without me sort of badgering down on him. It was like he knew what to do, so we worked really well as a team. So that helped the process as well, because in there, I can tell you there was hours and hours and hours and hours of wiring. So getting back to the original photos, follow the trunk line, try and work out exactly what it is that I want to do. And then once I had that trunk line determined, and I'd picked my front. That tree, there was some scarring around the back of the tree, which you couldn't really see, even if it was the dominant front. It could have been carved out, it could have been hollowed, but for me, the beauty in that tree, and if you have a look close at it, the beauty is in the bark. It's got this beautiful white paper bark on it that just peels off, and that's something that I really wanted to make a feature and dominant on the tree. I didn't want to put some carving on there, which would look nice, and I wouldn't blame anyone if they did go down that path. Carving on the natives can look really nice, but it can take a really long time as well to get there. And again, this is a demonstration. Not that I would have chosen the carving if it was in my yard and I had years to work on this thing. I still would have chosen exactly the same front. So I didn't compromise my design integrity based on the time allocation that I had. But it's definitely a factor when it comes to this, that was one I ruled out really quickly, saying, well, I'll never make that look natural, and that was my intent, is to have a very natural looking tree that, it still does look touched by man, it still does look flattened out in a few areas, but the next phase for that tree is to have it grow and start to fill and start to become far more natural looking. And these things in the wild, like most melaleucas, have the real sort of cloud feel to their foliage naturally, and I think that would be the way that I would develop that tree in the future. All right, so I picked the trunk line that I want. Then the next part that I wanted to work on was going to be, what part of the tree don't I like? And anyone that knows me knows the parts of the tree that I don't like are the dead straight bits, straight vertical, straight horizontal. I really try and avoid that at all costs, unless it's a formal upright, which this tree is definitely not a formal upright, because there's some really lovely movement in there. And you look at the thickness of that trunk, and there's no way you're going to be putting bends in it. There's no way. No chance. At the lower level where it's thickest, you've got zero chance of doing anything dramatic, right? So keep in mind my original intent, my intent always with that tree is to go with the flow, to work with what the tree's presenting me, but remove any areas that I didn't like. So right down the very bottom of that tree, if you look at it and you tilt your phone based on the final angle, you'll see that the very lowest part of the trunk is straight. All right, it's straight up, and then it's got some movement above that. Would have looked nice with it there, but my intent was tilt it. It's got to go one way or the other. And I went, right, okay. So I'm sitting down, I'm looking at the photos. I'll be honest, I had a couple of beers by this stage, so my feet were up. I was relaxing in a place called Albany, which is just beautiful. We'd had a day trekking around, looking at these most magnificent natural pools and rock. It was just incredible. So I was buzzing, right? I was really happy, really content with everything. I thought, now's the time. Now my mindset is like this. Start looking at the tree. Start looking at options. Start to think, okay, so if I tilt it right, what does it look like? And then I would get my phone, I would edit the photo, and I would tilt it to the right-hand side, and I'd look at the trunk line and go, okay, cool, save that. Then I'd get the photo, I'd tilt it to the left as well. And this is why I love the phones, because you get to do this stuff virtually. And, mind you, all I got was about 5 minutes with his tree. I got some photos. I got a feeling from it on what I wanted, and I could see something, but that was it. And so the next time I would see it was when it was up on a stage in front of 100 odd people, where you've got TV cameras on you and you're forced to do something. You're forced to perform. So I had to get this thing set in my head that what I wanted to do. So tilt it to the right, tilt it to the left. Then I was flicking between them really fast, like left, right, left, right, left, right, having a look and going, which one do you gravitate towards most? And for me, it was like, hey, if I tilt this thing to the left, that trunk looks really nice. Like about 2/3 of the way up the tree, I could see a beautiful trunk line, and I went, well, that's okay, because above that point, I reckon that if I wanted to bring the apex back, I could bend that point. I could use my steel bar, I could bring it across a little bit, and I could work with it, and it wouldn't be too dramatic. Or I could go with a slanting style. I could have it, tilting to the left and then continuing up towards the left. So then I thought, right, I've eliminated tilt to the right. Now I've got tilt to the left. Done. That's it. Now what do? Do I keep it as a slanting style or do I bring it back? So I was looking at this thing and I, again, edit the photo. I went, all right, so keep it out to the left. Where are the pads going to sit? What's going to happen with the lowest part where there's a bit of a second trunk starting to appear there? I'd have to get rid of that and I'd have to flow over to the left. Yep, cool, that looks viable. All right, so if it went back to the right-hand side, how dramatic would that be? And would that bend sit in line with the movement of the trunk that I was after? And would it provide symmetry? Would it provide balance to the design? So I drew on there, angled it, drew down some pointers on where I'd have things, some foliage pads, and I went, yeah, bingo, that's it. That's exactly what I want to do. That is the design. And I can tell you, at that point, I went to the fridge, cracked another beer, and went, that's it, I'm set. Looked at my phone, sat on it, looked at it again, gave it 5 minutes, came back, yep, still happy. Flick back to the other one. Do you want to do that? Do you want to go back to the right-hand side? Are you certain on this? Because once you start cutting stuff off, you cannot put it back on. And I was absolutely wrapped. All right. Leave it a couple of days, travelled to other parts of Western Australia, went up to a place called Margaret River. Oh, my God. God's country. Seriously. It is amazing. And sitting, again, very content in a very happy place. Found a nice little cafe, get a coffee, get some lunch, looking at the most amazing waves. The sun's shining down on me when I know back at home where I live in Melbourne, 13 degrees, there's hail coming down, it's raining, my kids are complaining to me about how bloody cold it is. I'm sitting in the sunshine, got shorts on, T-shirt, and I went, you know what, this is a good time to review the design. So I pulled my phone out, had a look at it again, and I went, that's 100% exactly what I want to do with this tree. So I'd locked it in, absolutely locked it in. But at that point, I said to myself, you've got to have a contingency. If something goes wrong, what are you going to do about it? So I was really fortunate that I get up on the stage, look at the tree, sit it back, put some wedges underneath this thing, and went, yeah, that is it. That's exactly what I want to do. I can see the trunk line. It's all coming together for me nicely. Cut this branch off, cut that, start opening up the trunk line a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Which we did, right? So Keith and I, we get into this thing, and I said, right, this is a plan. We're going to tilt it back. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And he's like, yep, cool. Now, with this species, with this variety, that as they dry out, they get more brittle. And I went, yep. So what are we going to do? We've got this tree, which we've got these lights beaming down on us. The thing's been inside for a couple of days at this point. The soil feels really, really dry. The branches, I can feel them. They're starting to creak a little bit as we're starting to wire these things and we're starting to place things. We're cutting them off. They're coming off nice and easy. And we get up to the point where with the apex, this trunk at the top had to be bent. And it's not massive, but I said, we just got to be really careful with this thing. And he said, how do you want to do it? I said, all right, well, let's keep working on the rest of the tree. We'll get to lunch. And we'll hopefully be at that point by about lunchtime. We worked through the morning tea. We'll work through the lunch break as well. We've got to keep this thing ticking along because there is hours and hours and hours of wiring on this thing, and we've got to get it right. I want this finished. I don't want to leave a tree half done, and I don't want to rush, but I want to work thoroughly and to the best of our ability and make this thing bloody perfect. Make it sing. Make it something that people look at and go, that's really nice. And something that, from my point of view as a demonstrator, I want to be bloody proud of what I've done. I want to look back at this thing and, some people might look at it and go, not for me. I don't like it. I prefer this. I prefer that. That's cool. But I want, and I'm patting myself on the chest right now, fingers in my chest as I'm saying this to you. I want to be proud of what I've done. And being proud doesn't mean rushing and snipping and cutting and snapping and breaking. It means that you get this thing to the best possible point. So when someone comes along, and the fellow who was lucky enough to acquire this tree, Hamish, you've done well, mate, because I can tell you that if I had a car or a van, that thing would have been coming home with me. I would have bid on it. I love it. And that was the way that I was working on the tree, was that this is going to come home with you. And you don't compromise, you don't cut corners. So I said to Keith, right, what we'll do is we'll quickly, as everyone buggers off and goes out for lunch, let's raffia this thing. This is going to bend right at this point. Let's raffia it quickly. Let's tape it up. Let's get a guy wire in there. Let's put a screw into the trunk and let's bring this thing over. And let's make a contingency plan. If this thing snaps off, what's going to be the apex? What are we going to do with this? And it was, there was things we could have done with it, but it was like, let's just get this done and not have the pressure of, questions and focus. Let's just do this really, really nicely and really smoothly. So, Keith being the local boy says, right, let's get some water on this thing. Let's get some moisture back into this trunk. Let's soften up this part of the tree. So we did that, put some raffia on it, put some tape on it. Everything's looking beautiful. Everything's looking great. Said to Keith, right, let's get a screw into this deadwood down here so we can actually anchor a guy wire to it. We've wired the top of it. And so as everyone leaves for lunch, the tree looks like it's a slanting over to the left-hand side, but let's really be dramatic with this and bring it back and put the icing on the cake, make this thing look great. But let's do it carefully, hey? So we wheel the tree back out the way a little bit, get into the shadows of the stage, put on the raffia, put on the wire, go to put the screw in. As he's screwing it, bloody head of the screw snaps off in the deadwood. It's like, there's no way. This better not be a sign that that this is going to go south on us. All right, so we put on the guy wire, start arcing it over, said, righto, you just take up the slack, mate. Let's just do this slowly. And we start bringing it over, and you can hear this thing starting to creak. It's like, oh, come on, a bit further. So we step back, have a look at it. How's it look? It's got to go a bit further. Bring it over slightly. This thing's starting to creak a little bit more. But it kept going. And I went, that's it. Stop. Perfect. That is the spot. That's exactly where we want this thing. So we finish this just as lunch break starts to wind up. Wheel the tree back out the front. And we said, hey, look what we've done. We've done this. We've raffiaed it. We've bent it. We're short of time. We didn't want to, and I was honest, I said, I didn't want to snap this thing off in front of you lovely people. We had an alternative, but this is what's done. We've worked it slowly. We've worked it methodically. We've put it in place. We set the apex. We thinned it out, gave it some flow and some directional movement to one side, and presto, we were done. But I tell you, it was a magnificent piece of material, which makes an enormous difference to a good demonstration. If you've got good material for your demonstrations, then you'll have great trees at the end of it. You in an allocated period of time where you don't simply go, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll make this show and we'll come back and review it in 2 years. When that's developed and the trunk's grown and we've done this, then we'll come back and we'll set some branches. It's like, no, okay, so you want all this done in this period of time. All right, well, there's limits to what we can do, and that's where compromise gets made. But I can honestly tell you that with all the trees that were made and what I did with my tree with Keith was to fulfill the vision that I had on this tree, like the design intent that I had with this tree was smack on. And, sat back, looked at it, got that proud glowing moment, thought, yeah, this is awesome. This is exactly what I wanted to do, and I was really happy with things. And then I sat back later that night. I'd taken photos of it, and as you'll see on the social media, I put the before photo in there, but also put in the design intent that I'd chosen. And when you sort of scale those two, and that's the only thing that I was looking at was, saying to myself, did you compromise? Did you damage the tree? Did you do something that you shouldn't have done? Answer, definitely not. No. Secondly, did you meet your requirements? What you had in your head as your target, was that what you achieved? And the answer was yes, and I was really, 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 really happy with it. So that's the demo that happened in Perth, and that's the background. That's as a demonstrator, someone that you sit in the watch and think, what are they doing with this, and how did they get to that, and what made them think of that? For me, it's never, I do walk into demos cold. Like that's often the case. You walk in there and go, yeah, well, whatever, it's this. So make it what you can, and you have to make decisions very quickly. But taking the time and processing, and this is what the point of this section of the podcast is about, is for you, when you look at a piece of material, don't rush it. Come up with a plan. Don't start just cutting stuff off, because once you start cutting stuff off, you can't get it back on there. And your work on your trees might not be this quick, you've got 3-4 hours, get onto it, start making this thing beautiful. It might be, okay, so how do I take that first step? What do I want to do? Do I want back budding? All right, if you want back budding, how do I get back budding on this species? Is it one of these ones that you cut hard and it pops back when it's strong? Okay, so do I need to focus on the strength of the tree? How do I do that? All right, that starts with repotting, So that's your plan. It might not be that you've got 3 or 4 hours. It might be 3 or 4 years of planning to get to that final point, and that's the journey. That's the bonsai. That's what we do. It's those steps that we take along the way to finish with something that's magnificent. That should be your planning process, your demo, your work on your tree. Work out whether it's a species that needs lots of foliage to get back budding. If it needs lots of foliage, how do I get lots of foliage in this thing without making it too dense and thick? Like, do I need to guy wire some of these branches down now? Like, okay, so step one, heavy wire, put the branches down, let that sunlight get into those inner areas. So then you get back budding, which means that when you do get to the point of actually setting branches and pruning back, you've got something to do. Don't just leave it sitting in the corner and think, it'll sort itself out, because they don't. It's up to you. You take those steps along the way. You do the planning. You draw the sketch of what you want this thing to look like and go, righto, how do I get from that sketch to from where it is now? What's my journey? What's my path? What's my plan? We've talked about bonsai plans, till I'm blue in the face, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Whether it's on a minor scale or a major scale, you've just got to have a plan. You've got to have a process. You've got to stick with it, and you've got to be diligent. And in strength and health of the tree, come back to it always. That's first and foremost. Bonsai Love. Let me talk about Bonsai Love. I don't know whether I was a bit more receptive to it than what I normally am. Maybe it's because I was meeting people that I hadn't met before. Maybe it's because so many people are so kind around this globe, then the way that they reach out and get in touch and, ask for help, or they say kind things. I think Bonsai Love far outweighs and is far more dominant than Bonsai Hate or Bonsai Dislike, because I can tell you that the people I see, whether they're doing a workshop for the very first time and they reach out afterwards and say, hey, look, I was a bit daunted, or whether they come along and tell you at the time, hey, I'm terrified, mate. I don't know what to do, and I'm not sure if I should bring my tree in or whatever. And it's, once you can get through those little hurdles with people, and the Bonsai Love starts to come out, between people, between someone and a piece of material that's sitting in front of them, and something starts to, that connection's made. Oh my God, it's a beautiful thing. I love it. Seriously, like I said, felt it everywhere I've been around the country, and Western Australia, Perth. You guys are amazing, because it was as strong as ever, and I just wanted to talk about a little bit about what I think I get out of it from a really selfish point of view, I suppose. It gives me hope, and it gives me drive, and it gives me inspiration. I love it when I get someone walk up to me and they sort of say, hey, love the podcast. It's like, you know what? You're my people. You are my people. And, they're all different walks of life, all different, occupations, all different everything, but it's like that one thing that we've got in common. And I know I've talked about this before, but we've all got this love for these little trees in pots, and you can't underestimate it, and you can't dilute it either. Whether it's someone who's got the most magnificent tree in the world, or someone who's just picked up a seedling. The way that we feel about it internally is so important and so powerful. And I come back to the point that as everybody involved with bonsai, we've all got an opinion, right? And our opinions are valued to us, but they're probably what some people don't actually realise is that your opinion means something to the person you're talking to as well. Whether it's by direct direct request you giving your opinion, or whether it's by influence, or you walking past and going, hey, that looks great, or hey, that's a piece of crap, that's rubbish. That means something to people, because I know I've had that happen at lots of times in my life where, I walk in with something and I think, you take it to a workshop or you put it on display or whatever, and you sort of, you might not directly be spoken to about it, but you'll hear someone say something and it's sort of like, oh, that cuts, that hurts. Yeah, and that's not the way that I see it. And then all of a sudden, the way that you feel about that piece of material changes, right? And it's not always for the betterment. It might be a piece that you go, oh, yeah, you know what, it is a piece of rubbish. Down the back you go, see you later, and might not get watered, might not get fed, might not get worked on, and it never takes the steps that it had. But before that point, before that opinion had come across, you'd had it in high regard, and you had a plan for it, and you loved it, So my comment and my focus on this part is to just focus on Bonsai Love. Look for a positive. I get asked to do critiques, right? And I get asked. I was asked in Perth to walk around with a group of lovely, beautiful people and say, pick out some trees in the show and tell them what they do different. That was the instruction. Tell them what can be done different with this tree to take it to the next level. But my focus always with the critique, and this is not going soft, my focus is always, what do you love about the tree? What do I look at when I look at that tree? What's the part that makes me go, yeah, that's lovely, that's really nice? Is it the bark? Is it the pot? Is it the placement in the pot? Is it, the taper on the tree? Is it the foliage? Is it the flower? Is it whatever? Because there's always a positive, right? There's always something nice that you can focus in on and say, I love that part. That's beautiful. And then I always look at trees, and this is not done in a negative way, because I do it with everyone's trees. I don't care if it's, whether it's a masterpiece or it's, a piece of junk I've got sitting in the back corner of my display, to say, how would I improve that? What would I do differently? Not from a negative point of view to say, oh, I don't like that, so I would cut that off. It's like, what would I do to take it to the next step? And that's the important part, is the next step, right? It's, how can I make this better? Not that it's bad now. It's just like, how can I make it that one step better? And if you always look at your trees, if you always look at other people's trees, and you look at anything on display, you look at it on the internet or social media, whatever it is, if you look at it and think, what would I do to improve it, or what would I do to take it to the next step, to a higher level? Bonsai just keeps getting better and better. It's not seen as a detrimental thing. It's like, and I take it that way. And honestly, it might be rose-coloured glasses that I'm wearing at the time, but when someone says a comment, oh, I don't like the deadwood, I'll look at it and think, okay, so what would you do to improve the deadwood, to make that tree better? Don't just say you don't like it. What would you do to improve it? How would you improve it? Would you hollow it out? Would you remove the deadwood? Would you carve it a little bit more? Is it too heavy? Does it need to be thinned out? Like, there's so much to that comment of, I don't like the deadwood. Dig a bit deeper. The person whose tree it is go, I love it. That deadwood's amazing. But imagine if you had it like, imagine if that was just lightened off a little bit and went to a fine tip at the end. Don't look at it and say, I don't like it with the deadwood, because how does that help anyone? How does that help you? How does that make you feel better? How does that bring out your creative genius that you can pass on to someone that makes them better at bonsai or enjoy their tree a little bit more? I was told a long, long time ago, you got nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. But I encourage people to say stuff, reach out and say stuff. If there's something that sort of, you think, oh, there's an area here that they could do with improvement, work on how it would improve the tree. Don't just say, yeah, that looks dense, or that looks, no, it's going the wrong way. Just say, yeah, imagine that if it went over to this side of the tree, or imagine if it went over to that side of the tree. That's where not only will the person who's receiving the information get more out of it, but you as an artist, as a bonsai enthusiast will get more out of it, because you're delving deeper into things rather than just that surface skim where you look at it and go, yeah, no, I don't like that, move on. It's like, okay, well, how can that be better? I think that's the Bonsai Love. I talk about the Bonsai support network, a few podcasts ago. man, it's alive and well. You see these little posses of people that get together and share the love of bonsai, that connect with each other over this one common thing. Like I said, all from different backgrounds, and you see them having a chat to each other, and they're catching up for a beer afterwards and whatever. It's like, yeah, that's how good is bonsai. Seriously, we start with a tree, a bit of dirt, and a ceramic, and we put it together, and then that grows into these lifelong friendships, this camaraderie, that bond, that bonsai love that we have, all starts from one little seed that's grown into a tree. And I say it so many times, and I'll say it in the future on this podcast, but seriously, trees are amazing. What they can do for us as human beings and how they can make us feel, that just can't be underrated, and it can't be diminished, no matter what. And if you got that feeling, got that spark, and you got that love, feed it. It's like a fire. Just keep stoking it and keep it pushing on and keep that bonsai flame burning, because bonsai love is alive and well around the world. Okay, let's wrap up this podcast. It's one that came to me recently, and I had a workshop the other night where it was actually talked about, because we did it, and it's called Digging for Gold. And I'd planned to put this in the podcast already, and so I'll explain what it is. It's not digging yamadori. It's not prospecting. I'll explain what it is, because I'm positive that almost everyone that's listened to this podcast has done it. And if you haven't, then I think from now on you possibly should. All right, so digging for gold. Where this came from, I've done it almost my entire bonsai life. It comes when you go to a nursery and you find a piece of material, right? It's a raw piece of material, and you look at it and go, "Oh, it's got something. There's a connection. I love it. It's the trunk, it's the foliage, it's whatever, right?" Digging for gold is where you start to separate that soil on the base of the tree, and you try and find the nabari. You try and find the base of the tree. You try and find a bit more flair on that tree. So the story I want to talk about is where I was working just recently. I put up a photo on the socials for a trident maple that's just losing its leaves, got a really nice silhouette. I've been working on this thing for a decade more. I can't, ages, developing trunk thickness, and it just seems to have these perpetual sacrifice branches trying to get the branch taper and thickness right on it. But it's got this magnificent nabari. Now, when I first acquired this tree, the nabari sort of spreads really wide to edge of pot. It's worth having a look at if you haven't seen it. But when I first acquired this tree, there was a little bit of basal flare, but it was way above where the nabari is now. And this thing was in an enormous pot. Like it had come out of the ground, and the pot must have been, I don't know, maybe 80, 90 centimetres wide. Like it was a tub. It was a beast. And it's obviously because where it had come from, it had come out of the ground, it had this massive root system, and rather than correcting it at that time, it was dumped into a big bucket filled with soil and moved on, which is fair enough. That happens a lot. And I think as bonsai artists, bonsai enthusiasts, bonsai practitioners, it's on us. We need to make sure that we get these, and we sort the nabari. It's one of the jobs we have to do with collected material, and you always factor it in. A tip for you, whenever you see an enormous pot with a little trunk in it, be prepared for massive issues with that root system, because they haven't been sorted out. Otherwise, it'd have been a lot smaller pot. Nurseries don't like to use big pots unless they have to, and it's really common. So anyway, I remember seeing this tree, looking at it going, yep, okay, price is okay, it's within budget, trunk's definitely got something that I'm looking for, like a nice taper, minimal scarring that I can sort out over the years, had a few major branches removed, as does any tree that sort of gets ground grown, for thickening of the trunk. And I thought, yep, this is going to be a process, deciduous, maybe 100, 150 years. I should have this thing looking beautiful, but let's get into it. Let's see. So for me, a big thing that I look for is the nabari, right? And it's got to be something which is nice as well. So all these other boxes in my mind had been ticked. I thought, yeah, this is fair game now. Let's have a look at this Nabari. So I start digging down, going a little bit further, and I went, oh, geez, there's not much there. All right, keep going. So I get this thing down, and I'm probably up to the tips of my fingers down in the soil on this thing, and I'm starting to spread it away. Another tip, try and not do it at the front of the nursery. Try and have this thing on a trolley, move the trolley around the back of the nursery, because I'm not sure all the nurserymen, and I apologise for it if you're a nursery owner, but sort of dig it apart, behind a bench where people can't actually see what you're doing. So, one, you'll look like an absolute nutter, but secondly, disturbing the soil is not always nice. But so start going down, start spreading this thing, and I went, oh, there you go, right at the front there. There's a beautiful sort of feels like it comes right out, like a plate. So I keep digging, stretching. I went, oh my God, this thing in this part of the tree, this third of the tree, feels really nice. Start digging around the other side, move it around. Oh yeah, there's a bit. Oh, hang on, there's a bit of a gap. All right, so what can I do there? Yeah, root graft. Yeah, no worries, that's okay. Keep going. Next part, start digging down. So by this stage, I've got bloody dirt and mud all over my bloody hands. It was. I remember the tree was starker, so it was winter, and it's cold, it's wet. Digging away this soil, pushing it apart, looking like a nutcase at the back of this. Like someone lurking behind one of these stands with all these trees on it, digging into this pot like a rat. Anyway, start spreading it apart. Yeah, there's another nice part of the Nabari, and another part. And I went, oh my God, this thing's a piece of gold. It's got, some really ugly, thick roots on it, but they spread the right way. They weren't actually connected all at that point, so they're all individual roots. So I went, yeah, perfect. This thing's for me. Cover it all up, pat it down, walk out the front, purchase it, chuck it in the back of the van. Yep, no worries. Let's get this home. Let's get this thing repotted. So when I took it out and I started digging down even further and spread it right the way down, it was like, okay. And it was the right time of the year to repot this thing. And it was like, oh my God, so there's some massive things on this. What do I want to do? So the plan was start to angle cut the Nabari so I can get into a pot eventually. And the pot that it's in, you'll see it's really thin, almost goes edge to edge on it. That wasn't the first step. So the first step was to go back into a bigger pot and start reducing down that Nabari. But the process of developing that tree is not the purpose of this part of the podcast. What it is talking about digging for gold. And this workshop that we had, Cedar comes into the workshop. You look at it and think, yeah, okay, there's the graft on this thing. All right, looks pretty straight going into the base of the soil. So I said, hey, what we've got to do is we've got to uncover the surface. And I said, and I'm just about to record this on a podcast. And I call it digging for gold. And I was like, ooh. Everyone darts around, has a look. So we start digging down this thing and we start looking, and lo and behold, below the surface of the soil, the Nabari starts to spread. There's a beautiful, nice, even root spread on this tree, and it just absolutely raises the quality of this cedar magnificently. Now, it was great to do it, and it was sort of lucky, because sometimes when you go to spread the Nabari, you might find that it's a bit ugly, that it curves back underneath the tree, that it's not what you thought it was going to be. That's okay, but we need to make sure that before you go and spend your hard-earned on it, it goes the way you want it to go. So I encourage you, dig for gold. Spread the root, spread the soil, get down, have a feel of it. If it doesn't have the root spread that you want, you can always air layer these things sometimes to get the root spread that you want. So it's not a change your mind thing, but at least you're aware of it before you get home and you start working on that tree. Righto, so that's the wrap. That's it. We're done for this podcast. Thank you for sticking around, my people. I love you all. I seriously mean that. Perth was a fantastic trip for me. There's more I want to talk about that and things that were talked about on stage, which will be interesting. But hopefully that talk of a plan and developing and taking your time and being prepared for what you're about to encounter rather than just jumping straight into it can help you as well. Bonsai Love, yeah, keep it going, long and strong. We've got a great opportunity to make the world a better place, one bonsai at a time, and stick with it. Don't focus on the positives, never the negatives, because there's plenty of those around. But that's the water off a duck's back. Just let that flow, because it means nothing. Focus on the good stuff in life, because there's a bucket load of it, and we've got an opportunity to really make it beautiful. And just be mindful about what you say and what you do, and how it can be interpreted. whether the person's there or not. It's really important because you matter and people matter, and the bonsai that you're talking about matters as well. Focus on where it can get to in the next phase. So thank you as always for sticking around. Please reach out as you have been. I love it. No matter which part of the world you're in, I'm more than happy to be involved. And you know that I'm always here. I'm only a message away, and I'll give you as much bonsai love as I've got. So until next time, happy bonsai.